I would like to call the planning commission meeting to order, please. We're gonna try to go some of the initial pieces of this while we're trying to get the IT working. Roll call, please. Yeah, Kristen Dumar,
Bree Rivera.
David Majewski.
Margot Rain.
Stephen Franklin.
Cynthia Bowdy.
Yes.
And we also have Chris Rogers and Antonino Santilio and Max Walton. Approval of the minutes from the November meeting. Does anybody have any comments, corrections to that meeting?
No.
No comment.
No comments.
Do I have a motion to
Bree, I'll motion to approve.
the minutes as distributed?
David Majewski, I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Abstain. I wasn't here.
Okay,
You're approving both sets of minutes at the same time?
there's only one set of minutes for us, the other one's for the city council.
Okay, thank
We
you.
can't approve theirs.
Okay.
I mean, we could, but it, I don't think it would be valid, so. And so just note that Cynthia.
I did.
got
Thank
that.
you.
Okay. The operating procedures for the planning commission call for the election of officers every January. So we only need to elect a chair and a vice chair. Do I have any nominations for chair?
Would you like to continue to be the chair?
I will do that, yes.
Okay, I second that.
Okay. Any other nominations for chair? Wow.
Motion to close.
Motion to close the nominations. All in favor of voting for Margot Rain to continue to be the chair of the planning commission for 2025?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The next, office is that of vice president, or vice chair,
Vice chair.
sorry.
That was me.
Okay,
I did many, many, many things last year.
okay.
Not.
And, Bree has also agreed to run for vice chairman as well. Do I have any other nominations? Okay.
Somebody's gonna have to make a motion. Either
Well,
one or the
nobody,
other.
nobody nominated me.
Oh, okay. Then do I have a motion to nominate, well, I'm making a motion to nominate Bree Rivera as vice chair of the commission.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Did I hear an abstain? Okay. All right. So, do we want to try to go with your presentation?
I'm gonna speech it.
Okay.
Because we don't have, it's the best I can do.
Okay, so we're gonna move you to next, and then we'll go with the rest of the agenda.
What about questions?
What question?
Questions and public comments. So that whole section is presentation, questions from the planning commission and public comments. Are you moving that whole section up to the front?
Yes, but it's only questions as to what additional information we want at this point. It is not discussion of that topic.
Can you tell me who this gentleman is? You mentioned.
I'll introduce myself. This is working. My name is Max Walton. I am the accidental city solicitor of the city of Newcastle. And when I mean accidental, my colleague, Chris Griffiths, was nominated as solicitor, and when he got elevated to the Delaware Supreme Court, you got the B team, you got me, so there you go. Anyway, thank you all. We had a nice presentation for you, but it's not working. So I'm gonna try to speech this and try to keep it really, really short for the members.
Not too short.
members of the commission and members of the public. So how did we get here? There was a set of concerned residents, and I was at the meeting, that had concerns over short-term rentals and rentals opening on the Strand. The council put it on its agenda for discussion. And at that time, the council debated it around and whether or not they wanted to entertain, for example, a ban or something of short-term rentals, or what they wanted to do. Ultimately, they said to the planning commission, they referred the matter to the planning commission. And I'll just read out the question so everybody's on the same thing. I promise I won't read much more than this, okay? Do we want to regulate short-term rentals and why? Do we want to make a distinction between short-term rentals and more conventional bed and breakfasts? And if so, how would we make that distinction? It says the current code regulates B&Bs as rentals. Although the code makes no mention of the length of rentals, and then it goes on with some code sites, they seem to imply long-term rentals as they make a provision for inspection, etc. Do we want to create a separate section of the code for Airbnbs? Do we want to prohibit Airbnbs in historic districts? How would we monitor short-term rentals? Do we want to change the current code to remove the definition of tourist homes from the list of uses as a matter of right? And then there's a number of other ones that dealing with the number of rooms, the requirement that the code does not unduly restrict parking, requiring the owners for designated quiet hours.
Sounds a little, I'm
I
sorry.
will. I'm doing my best. I'm sorry. I'm a little soft-spoken, a little shy, so bear with me.
It's really funny.
Requiring the owner to have quiet hours and requiring that the parties listing specify that the rental unit, and requiring the owners to force it. If short-term rentals should be registered, should they be registered? And if so, should there be any requirements? So that's what the council sort of pledged to you guys and said, go ahead and do. So for ease of reference, there are existing definitions of short-term rentals in the code that are permitted as a matter of right in the HR or historic residence district. Tourist homes are permitted as a matter of right. Tourist home is defined by the zoning code as a dwelling which overnight accommodations in no more than 5 guest rooms are provided or offered for transient guests for compensation. That was adopted, I think, in 1968. I'm 52 years old. I was born in 1972, so that's a while ago. There's also provisions for renting of 1 or more rooms to or roomers or boarders, non-transient roomers or boarders in the R2 district. So, pardon me. So I'll try to do this easily. Here's the map of the residential districts and sort of what they do and where they go. I'm fine. So, and there's also licensing in the code, and I will not bore you with the licensing provisions, but they are rental housing license. For those who are taking notes, are in section 140-37 or 140-38 of the code. They have to have a business license, and in 140-39 of the code, there has to be inspections. So what I'm told, gathered up, there's 150 rental units total in the historic residence district. 10 or less are short-term rentals, and the average occupancy is 30 to 50%. So what the city put together was a list, and I'm going to talk about Cynthia's fine presentation in just a minute. Put together a list of different towns in Delaware and sort of what they're doing. So the city put together sort of the city of Lewis, near and dear to my heart. I'm outside council of the city of Lewis. And they have provisions in there for short-term and long-term rentals and rental requirements. And I believe you've been provided sort of copies of those. There's provisions for violations and penalties. And there's all kinds of different variances. The town of Milton is undergoing the same review of short-term rentals as the council has asked you to do. And they have a definition of a vacation rental as a dwelling or structure or part that are used accommodations for compensation, and it's listed like any other rental unit. We provided the definitions of rental rooms and tourist or rooming house in the Dewey Beach Code. And then we also have the town of Odessa bed and breakfast and their different sort of requirements. So why are we here? And why are we here and what are the next steps? So the idea is we're here to speak, so I could sort of outline for you guys what the council told you to do or wanted you to do. And to prepare for ultimately the February Planning Commission. So you had some time to look at the definitions, look at the other codes, look at what's happening, right? And then there should be a discussion at the next Planning Commission meeting to discuss possible considerations for council. Because anybody who's written a code knows there are always 1,000 considerations, right? Which district, how restricted, how not restricted, what's gonna happen? What's the impact of whatever you're doing? So you have several potential options. Actually, your options are almost limitless. And I will say that. And I'm going to tell you what I think you can't do, but I'm going to say generally you have pretty wide range in this. To be fair, when I first got this assignment, I thought there has to be a constitutional something that goes along with this. Well, I haven't found one. So there's not. So when I looked at it, there's not a limitation. Where the courts have sort of struck down similar short-term rentals, largely at beach towns, and there's a couple out of New Jersey, where they say it's an arbitrary and capricious governmental action, meaning that there's not thought sort of put into it, and sort of there's going after particularized individual people or trying to stop things. One of the cases, I'm not going to give you the specifics, was that the mayor was mad at a group of people or an individual, and he made a very arbitrary and capricious sort of thing that happened to that person's area of their rental. So that's what's out there. Here are your options. And there's always the option to do nothing. You can always take that option and just go by the current code restrictions. Define the uses of rentals, short and long term, and bed and breakfast. You could then look at the other codes that are out there. And then you could better define, if you just so desired, licensing for short-term rentals, just as a general matter. That's sort of the framework you're working under. And I will tell you, Cynthia, thank you for preparing a very detailed presentation. And I personally appreciated all the work you put into that.
Thank you very
There's
much.
a lot that went into that, and there's some really good examples. It would have taken me a lot longer than a week, Cynthia, but
Saving us some money. what
yeah,
can I
yeah,
say?
very good. I'm so glad you didn't make me do that. So,
Good.
but and with respect to that, I'm just gonna take a little exception to a couple things, and I thought I'd bring them up now. I am not in general a fan of a moratorium, because under Delaware law, a moratorium has to go along and follow the exact same provisions as adoption of an ordinance. And if you guys could come up with your actual ordinance, you could get that introduced faster than you could get a moratorium put in place. And once the ordinance is introduced by council, you have this thing, it's called the pending ordinance doctrine, which says you can't have any applications until that goes through. So with that said, I just don't think, I would not recommend a moratorium per se. I think you're better off sort of establishing what your code parameters are that you want, getting that introduced and get it before council. That's not a criticism. That's just
But let me just say, the reason was that I felt that in order to have a fair process in our tiny little town, most of whom are sitting in here tonight, we needed to have some open meetings where people could testify and make statements and things like that. And that takes time. We'll have to organize that. It needs to be done over a period of months.
So my comment here is much more practical.
Mhm.
By the time you got through going through the steps you need to adopt an ordinance that goes through and sort of goes through and has a moratorium,
Yeah.
you could already be done all of those meetings.
Well, remember, we just had a moratorium go through here, so I kind of.
We had one that was proposed that was not adopted.
Wasn't adopted. No, I
Wasn't
know, but I
adopted.
didn't realize there was that much behind.
So yeah,
Fair enough.
there's a case.
As long as it's a inclusive process, that was my
Yeah.
major concern.
Just,
And also that it not take a year, because a lot of these other places like Charleston took a year to do their work.
And sometimes it
We
does,
don't need that.
and it moves as fast as the planning commission and the council so desires, right? So I've been in lots of places, and I'm in a lot of places where things do take a long time, but they don't have to. I think the more complex or controversial you have, the longer it takes, to be fair. So
One
that
other
was,
thing, Max, you didn't mention the requirement to have parking.
it's because I was reading, it's in here and I meant
Okay.
to say it.
I think, can
That's
we
something.
clarify that for everybody here, because
Yeah,
that's a pretty important.
So
existing
Anthony,
law.
to help me with the current requirement is one parking space per
For bedroom.
bedroom.
That's what I
Yeah,
thought,
yep.
yeah.
It's one
There are
parking space per
Airbnbs here
bedroom.
that don't conform to this, as far as I know. So,
Yeah, I know we had brought that up with one of the people who applied for a license. And we made them go out and show us they had the parking, because we didn't think they had the parking. So at the end of the day,
for
that's still a
people on the
requirement.
floor, it's off-street parking. That's the thing, because if everybody had Airbnbs and parked in the street, we'd all be dead. So,
Right, that is an off-street, but you're exactly right, it's an off-street parking requirement. So group writing is always fun when you're trying to go through a code. And so I think that next month, instead of trying to do 100 things, especially if you want to move fast, choose between do nothing and pick a code or a set of things that you like, right? And if there's a problem and you decide to actually, if you decide that there is a problem, you want to do something, then go ahead and adopt the code and then tweak around that as you have more. But I think you're better off not trying to reinvent the wheel or trying to get everything done. And the fact is that whatever the planning commission wants, and I want to make this very clear for the public, whatever the planning commission wants doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be adopted by the council. The council is the final decision maker. They the planning commission makes recommendations to the city council. You know, take it up with Councilman Madaway. Right. So that's the way it works. And so that was just a quick primer. We wanted to get some examples out there of different things. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but I thought we should actually have some examples and then kind of take it back and then come back in February with the example and say, I like this one, I like that one. Because the problem is, you can ask me to write an ordinance all you want. If you don't tell me what you want, I can't write it. I mean, that's the problem with the Airbnb one is, I can write you an ordinance, you may hate it. I need to know where to start.
One quick question, this article, what is it, 8? What is this from? It doesn't have like a city or. Do you know? I'm trying to figure out, is that from like a specific city code?
That was Odessa.
Yes.
Odessa.
Theirs is in a Word format, it's a little funny, but yeah, theirs was.
Okay, I just wanted to know.
And it's
what
on
it-
the slide for Odessa as well. And we'll post these slides as well.
Yeah,
Then
well, anybody wants a slide, we're happy to give them to you. I'm sorry that I had to read them, technological difficulty.
for people who have my document, I also included Wilmington and, what was the other one? Other cities closer to us, which are more analogous to us. We're not a beach town, right? So, so I tried to include their.
We're not,
which are
But
pretty complicated.
Odessa and
Odessa
Willis
and
both do
Milford.
have historic, and
Yeah.
Milford, they all have historic.
So I think those are
Right.
more relevant and a similar size population.
Yeah.
So I would be focusing on those.
That's is actually much smaller.
Significantly.
Okay.
I didn't hear anything about a public hearing.
We're not there. There certainly will be a public hearing. When
But I
you-
mean,
If there will be an ordinance change.
to help get input for us to think about.
Well,
what
we
might
haven't
wanna
gotten
do.
to that point, Cynthia. We're just collecting information today. And we're asking questions for Max or Antonina as to additional information we want. In February, we can discuss this when everybody's had time to look over this information and think about it.
So I had Matt kind of present a middle ground on the public hearing. So the way I would think it would work, and this may take one more meeting than I'd like, but we might come back in February and have a discussion, right, about what we like and what we don't like, or kind of the way we want to go. And then I would come out of that with something to write down, right? And that would be distributed to everybody in the public, right? The ordinance, this is the way it is. And then the public can provide comments, kick it around, that kind of thing. Eventually, when you guys come up with a document, remember, no zoning code is perfect. It's just not. You have to do the best you can, and the first application will expose the flaw in whatever you just did. It's just the way it works. But once you have that document, we're gonna have public input, public process about particular things in what I draft, because it will not be perfect. And when you guys say, quite frankly, not when it's perfect, when this is good enough to send it up to council, right? Then there will be what I call a more traditional public hearing, but there should be public commentary all the way through on the drafts, and like we ought to get them up on the website, right? Once we get once the planning commission tells me what to do, let's do a draft. We'll come in, I have my red pen, and you guys will say you did this wrong, or I want this different. Just the way it's gonna be, right?
Okay.
I hear all that, but this is an emotional issue for a lot of people in town. It's also connected to an important process that we're going through, which is looking at the comprehensive plan and how we might adjust it going forward. And the recommendation that I made in my document was asking people, 'cause there's a lot of people sitting here who want to have Airbnbs, and there's a lot of people here who don't. And it's tied to who are we as a place? And I think as we're talking about what to draft, we can do it without people to come here and talk their 3 minutes, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a dialogue before we even get to a place where we make a recommendation.
So,
Why would that not be?
so if the
a good
council,
way to do it?
I've seen it done 1,000 ways. I'm not saying that's the bad idea. I'm just, we need to start with a draft. I'm convinced we need to start with some sort
Why?
of draft. Because you're worried about it taking a long time, and if you don't start with a draft, you never get there. But if I work for the commission, so if you guys want to have a public hearing, you want to have a charrette, you want to have a whatever, I don't care. It's fine with me, right? It doesn't matter to me. It's what you guys want, but I've done this long enough to know that if you don't have a draft or two or some direction, it's easier to pick apart the draft and say general ideas. I like Airbnbs, I hate Airbnbs, or whatever that is. That's my view. But if you guys want to do it different, so be it. Council can vote and do whatever, you guys as a commission can do whatever you like.
I think what we'll do, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Margo, on this, but when there is public comment today, we take that information today.
Mhm.
We go back, we come up with our ideas and make a draft. And then the public starts to comment on that, and so a working document. I don't think that, Cynthia, that he's saying, make a document and then have people talk. I mean, we're gonna hear from people today. And we're also going to take that feedback into consideration when we start the document, and whether the document starts off in the right direction or not the right direction, we'll get a direction at the next meeting when we start to fill in everything. Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yep, we're gonna do
So
the best we
I
can.
think the point is to get people's feedback and listen to them speak today, write things down, figure out where we want to go from there. The next meeting, we figure that out and get a document drafted. The public will comment on what we've decided on. And we keep working on that as opposed to, that's what I believe.
Yeah.
The process would be, so that the community has the opportunity to give their input the whole way through the process before we come up with anything final. But I do agree, you need a jumping off point, whether it's the right or the wrong point, it's a point to start at.
I can give you a prime example of when I've been through this. One time, the city of Newark wanted to rezone the Newark Country Club. And it was a proactive rezoning by the city. So the city council voted that we want to go through the rezoning process. And they did. It was 7-0. And when they voted it on, they voted down their own rezoning proposal 5-2. I'm just saying it's an iterative
That
process.
happened here.
Right,
actually.
right, so.
Let me ask the question, okay, so the draft, okay, actually, I agree that yes, having a draft gives us a starting point, and then it's easier to tweak and fine tune and they kind of shoot from a nebulous, kind of perspective. So when can we have a draft that we can kind of start
So,
discussion?
so my proposal is this, in February, the February meeting, and I'll put it on my calendar, I'll come back. We have, now that you've had it all to look at, and you guys can kick around what drafts, what definitions, et cetera, et cetera. I'm gonna sit there and take notes, right? And we're gonna then go through that draft, and then I'll be like, okay, and I'll have at least 60% to get us started. And then I'll recirculate in 2 weeks' time before the next commission meeting. We'll put it up on the website, the draft that I come up with. I don't have any issue with that. So all the public can see it. And then we can have a further discussion and then we'll see where it goes from there. That would be my path forward, so proposed path forward. Because when this came up, I was like, to council, I was like, well, what do you want? I don't know. Like, what do we want? I don't know.
People objected my paper was so long, and that's because it is not simple.
It is not
It is
simple.
not simple.
I'll tell you what, I was very impressed with your paper. It was thorough and it was very good and I learned a couple of things and I appreciate it.
I have a question for you on
Sure.
that. In the city council meeting notes, November 12th, you made a statement that existing B and Bs should be grandfathered.
That's correct.
What do you mean by that?
So,
Because no one is saying that we're not gonna have them, but there might be regulations that they might have to conform to. Are you saying that they wouldn't have to conform to newer regulations?
they would have to conform to newer regulations. Can I give you just the doctrine? So we
Please.
work
Yeah.
off the doctrine.
Because I did a lot of work on that too, unfortunately.
Well, what? So, but the doctrine is as follows. There's something in Delaware, it's called a vested right. And the case is 244.5 acres of land. And it says you balance, so what happens is, and that's when you have an ordinance that changes the law with respect to a development project or something like that, right? In 244.5 acres, what happened was in Kent County, it was a development that was going forward. And they had all their houses and they got through preliminary plan approval. And the house next door went into farmland preservation, which then imposed a 50-foot setback. So the folks lost like 14 or 16, I haven't read it in a while, but some number of their lots because the setback was imposed based upon this property next door going into ag land preservation. And the Delaware Supreme Court said, when you have an ordinance amendment, you balance the nature and extent and degree of the ordinance amendment on the one hand, or, the value of it on the one hand, and the nature, extent, and degree of the developer's reliance upon under the law which they acted, and good faith reliance is the test. That's almost word for word, because I've litigated almost every case since then. Cheswold, Ocean Bay Mart, so I've done a lot of these, right? And so there's this balancing test. So here's the problem with a balancing test. It's very expensive. Those folks who have fought sort of vested rights claims, they may have won. We won Ocean Bay Mart and Rehoboth, right? But it's very expensive because it's a balancing test. There's lots of discovery. There's lots of things. So my recommendation stands. I don't think you should go after now. To give a full answer to your question, if you take away someone's vested right, and there's some differing case law on this, you can get into sort of constitutional issues, which I'm not going to speak about too loudly.
Please don't.
Right, but my point is, my recommendation is, if you're already in the pipeline, you're probably better off leaving those alone rather than trying to get them. Now, there are provisions.
Trying to get them, wait, let's
Trying to
stop
get them
right there.
removed.
But we're not, I'm not suggesting.
Somebody who's already done.
However, it should, in their infinite wisdom, the city council put forward a code that says, as many other cities in the United States and around the world do, that you can only have an Airbnb 30 days out of the year. So the typical legislation, just for everybody's information. I'm just saying, would that be able to be imposed on the existing Airbnbs or no?
I'm gonna reserve judgment. I think so.
I think so too, because
think
there's a
so.
lot of case law on that.
Well,
So-
the reason I had to answer you is because I haven't read that case law. Okay, so I'm just saying you can have time, place, I'm just trying to be honest. You
Yeah.
can have these time, place, and matter what becomes arbitrary and unreasonable
Exactly.
is a whole, in the eyes of the beholder. I'm just trying to call it like I see it. I think if there was a longer the time period or the limitation of days would be better because it's less chance you're gonna get challenged. But I think we're gonna have to look at whatever changes you guys wanna make on an individualized basis as they come up. I'm gonna give you what I think is the best call, but if you want my comments on vested rights were based upon banning a use that was already in play.
And I just want a clarification that existing, short-term rentals would be subject to additional codes.
They could be
Within a
depending,
standard of reasonableness.
they could be, depending on what they are. We're gonna look at those on a case by case
So my
basis.
first request to you is to get us some basic case law feedback on where it's worked and where it hasn't, because I've done a lot of work on this. And
I have a treatise I'll send you. I read.
please do, love that. One thing, but, yeah, I think it's important because otherwise this is just, rattling around. I mean, I think we have very specific risk in that we have 158 rental dwelling units between the two historic areas. And should this look like a financial bonanza, every one of them could turn into an Airbnb overnight. And that would displace many, many, many of our neighbors who've been here for a long time. And that is one of the key objections for short-term rentals, is that they displace people in rental units and damage the neighborhood quality. So, I want to make sure we're keeping it all.
My job is to keep you out of court and to keep you from winning, or to make it so we have a winning or an arguable case in the event that we do take a lawsuit for these that I hope not to.
I don't think we're going to get a lawsuit.
So,
You never know, but
yeah, you
But I
never,
don't think, I hear what you're saying, and I hear your concerns, and obviously that'll be discussed at length going forward. I don't think people who are considering doing Airbnbs are looking to kick out their current long-term tenants. I don't think that's the issue. I think it's trying to find a way to promote more tourism, more exposure for city. So I hear what you're saying.
I'm not
but-
talking about Newcastle. I'm talking about how it's worked around the world and in our own state. So that's all I'm talking about, is what's actually taken place.
Okay, again, but I still, again, we'll have this discussion at a later date, but I don't think the people who are looking at doing Airbnbs are planning to kick out their long-term residents or long-term tenants. So
I don't
The
think.
Delaware would have.
So, go ahead.
Sorry, Max, I have a question. There's a note in here, the tourist home / short-term rentals is only applicable to the HR and HC districts.
It's in the R1 or R2 district too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is maybe a silly question, is that should whatever we develop, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander?
Yeah, that's up to you. I mean, you can do it differently in different districts, certainly.
I
You
just,
could.
I mean, I understand the purpose of the HR district. I understand it's why it's there and its importance to the city. But I think if we're gonna tell people that they can't have an Airbnb here and affect the community, then they also can't have one there and affect the community.
The only thing that I'm gonna say on this topic, because you guys are gonna give recommendations, I'm gonna go one at a time. The Delaware State Code says you have to have uniformity within the district. So you couldn't do like this section of the HR district can have them and this section can't. There has to be uniform within that district.
Whoa, hang
What's
on.
gonna
What about
happen, what's
without-
gonna happen is Seventh Street is not part of the historic district, if I'm correct. So you just push, and it's very walkable into town, so then you just, it's just gonna
This
go to the out,
How-
I understand what you're saying, David.
Yes, I mean, we had a fire in an Airbnb Boothurst a year and a half ago. I had no idea it was an Airbnb. So,
Yeah, I'm just telling you, that's very clear. You have to be uniform within the district. So if you say,
But it's not now.
I'm just telling you what the Delaware State Code says. You have to be uniform within the district.
So then the stakeholder group is much wider than the historic area.
The district is a historic
The
district,
historic district.
not R1 or
R1 district
R2,
has
they're
to
all
be,
different.
R1 has to be the same, R2 has to be the same, historic district has to be the same.
So is the commercial district R1?
No,
And
Yeah,
it's-
so because one of the points I raised in the paper was that the historic commercial district could have different regulations from the
they
historic
could,
residential.
that's what I'm
district.
saying, yes,
Yeah, all right.
yes. I'm not fighting that point.
I have a definition question because I came up with this when I was looking at the code. In the code in 140-6, under definitions, it says boarding house, lodging house, tourist house, and it says a building arranged or used for lodging with or without meals or compensation by more than 5, but not more than 20.
20.
But then this says 5 rooms, so I'm confused
This is
with,
the zoning code. That's the
The-
licensing section.
so,
But they're in
but
conflict.
that.
They are,
they-
it's not perfect, yes,
Yeah.
agreed.
Okay, so
Yes.
that's just a
Something we
conflict.
gotta clean up.
Okay,
I mean, another thing that could get cleaned up is the whole boarding house, tourist house, rooming house thing, which, I mean, Antonia, do we have any boarding houses here in the city of Newcastle that you know of that are licensed?
Not that I'm aware of at this minute, I have to double check, but I'm sure in our history we had plenty.
History's fine, I'm talking about next.
Yeah, no, I have to double.
Yeah. My thought says yes. For existing now, Mike?
Halfway out.
That's a
But
little
that's-
different.
Well, they're boarding the people. are-
Yeah, that's a little different, yeah. Yeah.
Drug addicts and
Yeah.
they're boarding, they're being paid by the state.
Yeah, it's different. But I mean, all that language could be part of this clean, you know, if we're gonna do
I would have-
something,
I would have
if we're gonna
to-
touch this, we ought to finish touching the rest of it, because it's a mess.
Yeah, let's clean up.
Right, okay.
Okay.
So do I hear you right? You're suggesting that whatever we agree for the historic residence district, an R1 would be applicable in every R1 in the city?
No,
Okay,
not even close.
all right.
If you're
good.
gonna make a
That's good.
change, if you're gonna make a change in R1.
Yeah.
You can't do it to half of R1, you have to do it for all of R1. If you make a historic district change, you can't do from this street to this street,
Oh,
has these
right.
regulations,
No,
to this
no,
street to
no,
this
no,
street,
okay.
to,
All
right?
right, we're clear.
Now, the
Yeah.
point that I was making, Cynthia, was that if we're gonna use the arguments of ruining community and the fabric of the community and being problem houses and things like that, it can't just be applicable to one area.
Oh, no, I
It
agree.
needs
It's
to be
a whole-
applicable across
Well,
the board.
I
It
made a
can't
map
just be a
showing where all
nitty
the
issue.
potentials
but-
were in the paper.
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, I got it. Yeah, thank you. for clarification.
We have do we have at least a consensus on a path forward? Ultimately, you guys are gonna review. Next time, we're gonna come in, you're gonna say, "I like this, or like that," because you could very well be different than you. And you, each person could have a different view of what the right thing is to do, right? So we gotta have that debate. And that's gotta come up, but I don't know that it's fair to have such a debate. Absent time to look through everything that Cynthia put together, the calves that we have, and then have that debate, and then I gotta try to make sausage out of whatever you guys discuss and try to come up with a draft that it's at least something we can start with.
okay.
Can I recommend that we put all this stuff that we're using as our source material on our website? That's what the city of Charleston did. They had a place on the website where you could go and download it all and look at it.
I have zero objection to it, but I just capability wise, can we go to a spot and put it on there? I have no issue with that.
Yeah. Because that would allow people to look at my paper as well. Since I think I just got it blessed by the almighty.
I didn't bless it, I just said it was a lot of work and there was some good stuff in there.
I'll put the meeting materials in here.
That's fine. So what other information does anybody on the committee want from either Max or Antonina before we discuss this in February?
I mean, I think they've provided some good base materials in conjunction with Cynthia's well-prepared paper here. I think it's at least a good start to get a boilerplate going, and then we can edit from there as we go through discussion.
Yeah.
Does anybody disagree with
yeah.
that?
Well, I would like to ask for a report on the existing licensed Airbnbs that we know about, because of course, they happen that are unlicensed, as you know very well, and bad things can happen, but.
I mean, I don't know if that
ones
place was
we know-
unlicensed or not, but we don't get that information.
Yeah, well, under the current code, it wouldn't have been. But in any case, get that, and how many of them are in compliant with our existing code, which has the number of bedrooms, the number of people, the parking, off-street parking and all that. Can we get that information for the existing licensed Airbnbs in town?
Yeah, the rental license.
Yeah.
For the-
Okay, that would be helpful, because I just think it would be interesting for everybody
Yeah,
to see
and you
that.
included the info that you pointed to, so
Yeah.
I'll share that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, and you pointed out, you found out that they're at about a 30 to 50% occupancy rate. And do we know if there's been a lot of complaints?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay, and you checked with the police to
Yes.
find, there was no,
At the time of the council meeting when this was presented, they checked on the past 6 months and never no
Okay.
complaints.
so. So there's been no issues with any of these short-term rentals up until this point, okay.
None that I'm aware of.
Any other information wanted from the council? Okay,
All right,
If there are any further questions from the commission, just email them to me and Max and I will.
thank you all. And I'm very sorry to the public that we couldn't get the fine presentation up there. But we'll make sure that we have it so y'all can read it. It was much different than what I said, but there you go. So thanks.
well, the
everybody.
details of the
Right.
code, you can read the details.
Madam Chair, may I be?
You may be excused. Thank you. Thank you very much, Max. Thank you for putting, you and Antonina for putting that together. Okay, next we're gonna start at our November meeting. We had
Are we
agreed,
gonna do public comments now?
no?
Sorry, guys.
We're going to, we had agreed that we would review, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 areas of the comprehensive plan as part of our 5-year review. And so I'm hoping everybody has read through those, and the charge was to read through what's there, and to identify what you think might need to be changed or need to be addressed. And then to be able to answer the question, does that need to be done now? Because it's apparently a real major ordeal to change the plan at the 5-year mark. Or is that something that definitely goes onto like figuratively speaking, a pad to be addressed when we get ready to do the 10-year plan?
Can I ask some questions?
Sure.
This is probably more for Chris.
Probably.
Chris, do any of the ordinances that have already been passed through 2024 get added at this point, or does that only get added at the 10-year mark?
Or
Like zoning changes, we
No,
changed the zoning.
Yeah, I see, like, when I read through, they said this ordinance was passed on this date, blah, blah, blah. Is that done at the 10-year where they add in all the ordinances that passed through during that time? Or is that something that should be added now?
That's apples and oranges. An ordinance is the regulation that can be based on language in the comprehensive plan. But when you pass an ordinance change, to your zoning ordinance, it doesn't get reflected in the comprehensive plan. It's kind of the other way. The comprehensive plan sets the blueprint for land use and transportation, and your zoning ordinance and your subdivision regulations are the two primary land development ordinances that implement the comprehensive plan.
Then why are they cited in the
Yeah, they're
comprehensive
sorry.
plan then?
Yeah,
So they may make reference in the comprehensive plan. Is that what you're talking about, Kristen?
Yeah, they're cited all over the place.
Yes.
Yeah.
So those would be good, if you so chose, you could update that at the 5-year. But it's more common practice to do it at the 10-year when you're reviewing the entire comp.
I'm sorry, I've got just a couple questions, just in general about the plan.
Can you give me an example, I'm sorry, of an ordinance?
No,
they're all over.
they're all over.
They're all over.
Yeah, it's just the reference to it.
So our last comprehensive plan was done in December of 2020. A lot of this information is derived from a census that was done 10 years older.
Yeah, it was
They're every 10 years. is there any way that we can do something that the information in our document reflects the most recent census? Because you're looking at 10 years older, and in one section, I have this for later on, one of the things we're referencing is from 1999 as a goal. I mean, that's over 25 years old at this point.
Yeah, if you choose to update the census info, you can do that as a revision and send that to the state.
So that can be done in the 5 years?
Yeah.
Because my question literally was off of that and with the dates, because I know there are recent reports and things like that, with transportation, housing, et cetera, and the different sections. So my question was.
Yeah, those are things you can update now. But to Margot's point, like it's a long, it's not, you know.
Well, I was
difficult to
wondering, there's a
mark,
way
but-
that we could get a 1-year extension so we could have the census data before the next,
The next 10 year?
yeah. Is there any way that we can do that so that our document, I mean, instead of having two big updates at the 5-year and the 10-year, have,
Well, it forces us to always be behind. I
yeah,
mean, the way.
significantly behind.
Yeah, we're always having to use census data that's already 10 years old. I know, I wondered if there was a way to
It's like
do
a
that.
Delaware problem, unfortunately, a lot of municipalities face that where it's the right before the census comes out. But yeah, that's something you can, if you so chose, update at this point.
Can we, go ahead, Chris.
Are you suggesting that we just update, I'm sorry, I can't, the setup. Are you suggesting that we just amend the plan just for the census, just to update the census information? Because.
I guess I was saying, can we ask the state if we can delay it a year or 10 years so we can have is everybody on the same schedule? 2020 and 2030?
It's a
Because,
5 years, everybody's on adopted plans, different years, so.
I mean, is there any way that we could ask them for an extra year just so we can use the most recent census information in our findings? And to me, and when does the census information actually, I mean, I saw multiple different, when I looked up
Yeah.
things that come out, I mean, to me, what we referenced was 10 years, 2009, very old information. The only recent information came from
2017.
the American Community Survey of 2017. So to me, I feel like you can't move towards the future if you're looking at things 10 years ago. And that's a big stumbling block with making this document current even.
Right.
There's
I
a,
mean-
oh, sorry, go ahead.
If the thinking is to update the plan in this 5-year incremental period that we're in, solely to update census data, I would support the current current census data that we can get our hands on. That I would suggest that we get you the data that you want as recent as it is available. And then determine if the change in the demographics warrant a rethinking of certain themes in the comprehensive plan. And not necessarily just update the plan to include updated census information. I mean,
Yeah.
is the census data different enough that there is a recommended policy or regulation in the plan that is no longer warranted because of the updated information? Because, anybody can go get census data. It's, they update it every year. The decennial census, is sort of the parent census, if you will, but it's constantly being updated through the ACS, American Community Survey. So, this is not the only place where census data lives, of course. So,
We can also get updated information from the University of Delaware. There's a whole group there
Yes.
that all they do is produce demographic information for the state of Delaware. I think Ed Ratledge is still running that.
Yeah,
Because I ran across that.
the Delaware Population Consortium, they use census data, but one of their main, the positive aspect of the University of Delaware folks is that they do projections. And those are often used in a comprehensive plan. It's difficult to, make population or housing projections on a relatively small geographic area like the city of Newcastle, because the smaller the area is, the harder it is to project, because if the River Edge community does or doesn't happen, that is, you know,
Huge.
outsized
Yeah.
impact on a projection.
Right.
So at the county level and at the state level, that's really where the projections are fairly accurate. But at an urban city level, at a small urban level, it's very difficult to make
And
projections.
that's what was troubling me, is that we've agreed to add 2,000 dwelling units over the next, dwelling units to accommodate 2,000 people over
Yeah,
the next
1,000.
couple of years.
1,000.
Yeah, but it would be 2,000 people. And that would materially affect the way that we plan for the future of the city, and that's totally not reflected in this document. I'm not suggesting that we add that because they may or may not be built, even though they've been approved. But it creates a need for mindfulness of that these exist and that these may have an impact on what we plan. The other thing that was on my mind is, unfortunately, I missed the conversation about accessory dwelling units in the last meeting, but I really believe we should do some of that, and that again would change the population substantially, and that would affect zoning and planning and all kinds of other things. Are we gonna do anything with that now, or are we gonna leave that for 5 years?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit at the last meeting, you know, let's take accessory dwelling units. The comprehensive plan does not need to be revised or updated to do something like accessory dwelling units. There's enough language in the comprehensive plan that says, you know, provide a variety of housing types.
Okay.
My point is always sort of the opposite. If the comprehensive plan clearly said, you know, the city of Newcastle should adopt an accessory dwelling unit ordinance to promote for a variety of housing types and to address the housing crisis, you know, in the state and in the country, then that's clearly a direction that future framers of a code would take into consideration and say, man, the comp plan says we ought to adopt an accessory dwelling unit ordinance. You don't really need to, it's not mandatory that you do that, but you're suspect, you jeopardize, you know, being criticized in the future by someone saying, how come you never did anything on this ADU ordinance? It's in the comp plan. But the reverse is not the same. Just because accessory dwelling units is not mentioned in the comp plan, to the extent it's not, it doesn't mean that we can't pass an ordinance or consider an ordinance.
Okay.
There's probably nothing in the comp plan that says anything about tourist homes or Airbnbs, but you know,
There are 2 references.
we're on track to possibly make an ordinance to address, you know, some of those issues. So not everything needs to be explicitly in the comp plan for us to take action on it at the regulatory level. It helps, but it's not
Okay.
mandatory.
Well, let's,
I like the idea of getting the updated information, like you said, and with updating it from 2017 to reflect the most recent being 2020. I don't think we need to request an additional year delay because we're already at the 5-year point. Now we're at the 6-year point. There's no reason for that, but I think definitely, getting the updated data census information is critical.
so let's jump into this so we can get.
Question down here around up there.
So in the past, has been one of the 5-year where the census information is updated and numbers and that's for date?
We were just looking at another comp plan in the last week or so. I think the city of Newark did something like that where they updated, you know, census data in the 5-year review, and they amended the comp plan. But I think the census data the updated census data led them to other conclusions in the comp plan that should be revised. It wasn't, I don't believe it was just to include the updated data and then that's it. I would suggest let's look at the updated data or the most recent data that we can get you and then see, you know, is there anything that's changed that, you know, the framers of this comp plan didn't anticipate or is way out of whack that we need to jump on.
That's fair.
Because remember, you know, the comp plan is the foundation of your land use documents. And in order to implement the comp plan, it takes months and months and months to implement and to create ordinances and to fully activate those ordinances and take effect. So the comp plan is just the beginning. If you want to make substantial changes to ordinances that have to be reflected in the comp plan. The primary example of a direct nexus between the comp plan and ordinances is land use and zoning. State law says within 18 months of adopting a comprehensive plan that changes the future land use plan to something that is not what it currently is in the zoning today. Within 18 months of adopting a comprehensive plan, you have to adopt zoning maps that are consistent with the future land use plan of the comprehensive plan. So that's probably the best example of the direct linkage between something having to be done in your comp plan or a direct link between an ordinance and your comp plan. But it doesn't mean that we can't pass other zoning ordinance changes. Just means that your zoning has to be consistent with the comp plan. And if we are not happy with something that is fundamentally, zoned on your zoning map, then that should be reflected first in your comprehensive plan. Little things, I'm not dismissing the importance of it, but ADUs and tourist homes, those are regulatory tools that not necessarily don't have to be first thought of in a comp plan.
Can I just make a request, and I don't know if Antonino or Margot would handle this, just to get us updated side-by-side comparison of census information and the updates, just to see how accurate they still are and accurate the predictions are. Just to get an idea that, is it way off? Because, this happened in 2020, COVID, everything's changed, people work from home, people aren't working from home, blah, blah, blah. So there's so much that had changed, just to get an idea of where the updates are and if it's
I had
maybe
sent,
something that,
right, I sent a link that just was general census information, which showed that the population, the population is significantly above what they projected it would be in 2030. So, Antonina and I can figure out who the best place to go is to get some more detailed information about that and what the
It'd be interesting if
projections.
you could find out more about the aging, because what really struck me going through the detail was the extraordinary increase in aging population. And that would certainly drive different decisions going forward, I would think.
Well, it
being
takes a
one of them.
lot. I mean,
So
the age of the population determines what the people do, want to buy. So, yeah.
how they live.
Mhm, mhm.
One other thing that struck me is going through here, I could see lots of little details for each of the sections we looked at. Can we give you our observations, or who do we give it to?
Well, that's what we're
That's
trying
what
to
they-
talk about now.
Yeah, okay.
So I want to go just chapter by chapter. We talked about the introduction. And most of these, I'm thinking we're not going to be doing too much with, but for chapter one, for the introduction, is there anything anybody feels needed to be changed? Is something they think we need to discuss?
I have several.
Okay.
Page 5, so I could do it in writing or I could do it now, however you want to do it. On the last paragraph, we need to update some of the zoning informations to take into account the zone changes we've made in light industrial for the Lucas Drive project. Page 5.
Again, that's one of the questions that, do we really need to do that now?
No,
can it be
for
done-
future reference.
Okay, that's
You know,
fine.
we've just read this, it's fresh in our minds. Why would we throw it away and start again in 5 years? So that's what I was asking is, do we want to record all that stuff. Now, I think we've agreed we're not gonna update it unless I misheard this conversation.
No, so
Right.
go through them and then we'll begin to create a list that we have ongoing. Okay.
Okay. I had a complete objection to the total introduction on page 4, which I thought was idiotic, and I agree with the whole thing, but that's just my opinion. I was wondering on page 6, there's a bunch of material reference feedback from the public, a topic I'm very interested in, and it's not actually, it's included in a weird way in this document. Is there any other way, like there were presentations made that summarized it?
That was before I got here, so I have to.
For the 2023 comp plan,
Yes.
oh, I'm sorry, for the 2003.
2020. Okay, it was under 2023 comprehensive plan, or 2003 comprehensive.
Yeah, I'd
plan.
have to look. back.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see that, to see what may have changed from then to now. Then on page 7, comprehensive plan checklist for towns and cities with a population of 2,000 persons or more. I was just asking, can we get a copy of that?
Of the ordinance?
It's the 2009 update, and there was a part 1 that had, the state's comprehensive plan checklist for towns and cities with a population of 2,000.
At the top of 7.
Can we get that? It's on page 7.
You wanna,
The
Should
state
refer to the
document.
First paragraph.
has it been updated or is that still
no.
relevant?
There is a checklist, published by the Office of State Planning.
Yeah,
thank you.
Coordination.
Right on their
for comp
website,
plan.
right?
It's a
Yeah.
checklist, it's nothing material.
I thought it would be helpful to us, however, as we live in a city of 2,000 people or more.
Well,
Um,
I want one that's more recent than 2009.
Well,
It's-
Okay.
If the planning commission wants the most recent checklist, this section is just reiterating what happened back in 2009, so, yeah.
Yeah.
But the
So,
fact that such a
Cynthia-
document exists
Yeah.
seems interesting,
Yes,
and wouldn't we like to look at it,
yes.
since it's issued by the state?
Yeah.
It's relevant. That's it, that's all I got on the first chapter.
Anybody else have any other comments? Okay. Chapter 2, community profile.
Oh, I did have one question that just for my information. I was trying to understand, with regards to the intergovernmental, coordination on page 10. I understand, obviously you want to coordinate with other people around you, other, the state and so forth, the county. I was trying to understand, I know our big neighbor to the north here, Wilmington. What does the Wilmington Area Planning Council and the city of Wilmington, how does that tie into what we plan here in Newcastle? I'm just trying to understand the connection.
So because there are neighbors, they would look at it from their perspective
Their
of what
perspective, okay.
they are trying to do. Are they trying to rezone certain areas? Are they trying to build a large industrial park, large residential park? How would that impact us? How would that impact them? If our zoning code changed and brought an influx of people or brought some kind of industry here, would it impact them?
So basically just make sure the right hand knows what they go.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Wilmapco is a larger, it's more of a regional
Yeah.
thing. It's not just the city of Wilmington.
Okay.
So like
Wilmap-
Wilmapco has proposed, road updates and
Right.
flow and
Okay.
traffic patterns and things like
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
For the city.
And things like that can be beneficial, like if we were to create like a large trail to connect the two of us, on the trail that already exists. It's coordinating, like
Okay.
large scale.
That's fine. I was just curious. Okay.
Do we have any ongoing, and I guess we meaning you, interaction with the city, just, what are you guys doing? What are we doing? Or should we do that? Is something?
Yeah, I mean, in my profession, I have a lot of connections to other city managers and other people in local government, so.
You're the president,
Isn't there a representation from the city of Newcastle for Wilmapco?
Sorry, say that again.
Is
There's a
there
WMAPCO presentation for the city.
representation from our city?
There was, someone on the planning commission, that is not.
The mayor used to go, eons ago.
Okay, so, I understand, I think the most recent person was Gail Sykes. So I need to talk to the Wilmette people to see if there's still representation needed from the city and. Yeah.
Okay, chapter 2.
It's chapter 2.
I think it's all statistical data. It could be updated. I mean, there's not much disputing it.
No.
Yeah.
I would just like to note though, for the next iteration, that we make sure to look very carefully at the aging population. Because I think that's extremely material. It is a shocking large percentage of the population. And
I
it's
think
very-
that'll get addressed when, Antonina and Margo were able to get us updated census information. And then we can decide at that time whether it should go into the 5-year update or not, and.
No, I'm not
And
saying
then-
5-year update. I'm saying for the 10-year update, that it's a discussion point for the 10-year update, just to be clear. I'm not suggesting any change for the 5-year. I thought that's what we were doing now. like,
Yes.
Input for the 10-year.
No,
No.
we're
No, this is
making
for the
input
5-year.
Changes to the 5.
Ah,
But if you want to make suggestions to tenure, that's fine too.
all of my suggestions pertain to the 10-year.
Okay, thanks.
Chapter 3, city and community services.
On page 24, under planning commission, and this is just a little nitpicky thing, everything else mentioned the office, the term lengths, the term limits. It did not mention other than 9 members. I know what the term is, but it didn't specify what the term was in the planning commission.
That's a
Okay.
good point.
That was my only observation. Other than that, nothing else.
Anyone else?
On that chapter,
Mm-hmm.
just the schools need to be updated.
Yeah, I noticed St.
Yeah.
Peter's is
St.
no
Peter's is.
And the address to the, Harvest Christian Academy is
Yeah.
different now. That
I
was the
know
only
that
2
too, that's on
updates.
Page 34. And St. Peter's is on 30.
35, and so is the, Harvest Christian Academy.
They've actually, they're building a church now on,
Yeah, but that's.
No,
not gonna be a
they're
school.
they're located on the, next to Carrie Downey now. They're no longer located at the, First Baptist School.
no, I understand that, but I was thinking about the church that we approved being built.
Yes, but that
But
is
that's
not a
not-
school, it's a church.
She's talking about
Places of
places of
Worship is on
worship.
page 34. Madam
Oh, okay,
Chairman.
we were talking about the school stuff.
I would wait till that's built
Built.
before we add it.
I would too.
And just to be clear, it has not been approved yet. The Board of Adjustment application has been, the development application is not.
It's a note to file
Yes,
for 10 years.
sure. I
Thank
tried
you.
to clear them up.
Okay, anything else from community profile?
I had a quick question. Some of these entities say how often they meet, like, meets 4 times a year, meets during city election year, odd years, like, should we be that specific? Maybe that's something to do. For consistency.
Right.
Chapter 7, transportation.
I had a bunch. On page 68, this is for the 10-year, not for now. We have a bike amenity being built on 273 and Markel Trail, the big one, which I think is relevant to that chapter.
Where? What page?
Page
68 at the
68.
bottom.
Oh, okay, right,
Uh,
yeah, I have, that note needs to be updated.
We can wait for 10 years though. On page 70,
1 second.
I'm sorry.
On page 68, we talked about the bicycle lanes. It said, basically that there is almost no dedicated lanes exist in the city, and then it talks about the varying widths. So my question was, does any of them actually have bicycle lanes? And could probably kind of suggest that we do.
Sorry, you said page 68.
Page 68, yes, under.
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
What I was, no, the note that I made to myself was, And reading that first paragraph, it talked about, you know, that there are no dedicated bicycle lanes in the city, and it goes on to talk about the varying widths and the misleading widths and so forth. I'm saying, does that mean the city needs to actually have dedicated bicycle lanes?
Or at least discuss it, yeah.
Or at least discuss it, yes.
Yeah, I would put that on,
Yeah.
yeah, that's definitely something for the 10-year plan.
I mean, over by UD, they have very clearly dedicated, very
Mhm.
clearly marked bicycle lanes. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a topic, maybe we need to address
Yeah.
it.
Absolutely.
You probably need to actually look at it too, because there's more bicycle lanes now than there were when this document was done.
Mhm.
So on our, down our notes, so.
What else?
Page 70, air, we need to add the Avelo Air Services to the airport. And I would suggest for the 10-year,
Oh, right,
that we
it just
look,
needs to be updated. Okay.
yeah, that we look at on the rail. This is something I've talked about, with Councilman Mataway too, that given the, incidents of accidents at railways with toxic materials, and we know we have a lot of toxic materials passing through our city, that we have a more focused and comprehensive monitoring program of the Norfolk Southern activities, which they're very capable of giving us. They have a lot of data. But I think we should be looking a lot more closely because they misrepresented in the meeting, public meeting, that they had the quantity of cars on the trains and things like that, which has a potential material impact on public safety. So I think we need to look closer at
Yeah,
that.
before you go for it, actually, I agree, surprisingly, I actually agree with you on that.
It's amazing, isn't it?
On page 70, regarding the rail, I was at that meeting and I too was a bit disturbed about the denial of, the amount of, tanker trains and cars that go through.
They lied about it.
But my main issue was the fact that the two major crossings on, 9 at Delaware and by the Walgreens are very cut off, and on the other side of Public Works, that they're not gated. You have a gate on Washington Street, which gets significantly less traffic than those two. And their argument was there wasn't really a need. I'm happy to say that upon looking at the minutes for the city council, that concern's been addressed. So, and that's going to be rectified because that definitely needs to be done. So I was very pleased to see Del Dot's presentation and their plan to start in the spring of 2025 to address that. So that resolved it.
But David would have access, or as the fire department, you've had some interaction with Norfolk and Southern about that information. Will we be able to even get it from them?
They're not gonna give it to you.
How about to the city?
They won't give it to the city either.
Okay.
I can get it. I had to jump through a lot of hoops. But the information is almost,
Sure, they consider it proprietary.
no, it's almost not 100% accurate by the time the train gets here, because if the train stops and picks up cars at 4 different locations, the manifest may not be correct, or where the car started in line may not be where they ended in line after 4 pickups. So, the information exists. I have a limited access to it. I had to jump through about a year's worth of hoops to get it. So, yeah.
Okay.
It's a significant problem though, because if there were an accident, they were representing in that public meeting that they knew what was in every rail car and
Well, they
their
do.
system, well, that their system would tell them. Are you telling me that that's not true?
I'm telling you that I don't have access to their system. I have access to a subsidiary of that.
If we ask for it in arrears, it's not, it's only, say at the end of every month, get a report, and then we could do what we wanted with the data. I actually did a proposal for a dashboard on that for Councilman Mataway, because they're being untruthful about what they're doing. You can sit there and observe it.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
But
I have
whether
nothing to
they'll
do
give
with
us
that.
the information or not, it's a whole nother issue.
Well, we can also make a legal action on them and force them to. They're being dishonest about what they're doing.
We should.
yeah, I mean,
But
that's a
then
different
that's-
topic.
we need to go into
That's a
it.
different
What
topic.
other issues on this chapter?
I think some of the topics or the projects that it proposes have been either initiated or completed, but I don't know that we necessarily need to run through and put check marks on everything just to say that they were
I think
done
we usually do that with our
with our
annual.
10-year.
Yes.
Well, we do an annual update to them on what we've completed from what things we've done.
Okay.
since-
That gets, submitted to the state.
Okay.
So we're kind of reporting on that annually, so I think it's more so, is there anything significantly different that we need to change right now for
Gotcha.
5 years?
I haven't been here a year yet, so I apologize.
Yeah, no, that's
No,
okay.
it's fine.
Can I ask a question on page 79, G7-4? This is referencing a plan from 1999.
Mhm.
Is that still in play?
Or is that the one they're doing now?
Pursue implementation of recommendations for ferry cutoff area in 1999, City of Newcastle Transportation Plan. Are we still looking at something that's 26 years old?
No,
We have a 2022 one right here.
yeah, the Wilmotco has since updated the City of Newcastle Transportation Plan.
For that area though, or can we adjust that to the 2022?
It was.
Or
it's
strike it?
Citywide, and I don't think the most recent plan,
I think a recommendation for the ferry cutoff area in this recent.
if they did, it's very high level, it's very schematic. And again, I would say that to the extent that you want to move forward with something from the most recent City of Newcastle Transportation Plan, prepared by Wilmotco, that it doesn't need to be first reflected in the comp plan.
Can we just note that this is outdated
Well,
or?
and I think we'll just
Anything like that.
update all that stuff as we move forward.
I just think it should be noted that we're not looking at that information.
Yes.
Somebody come in and say, well, what's this? It's like, well, we're not even looking at that. We know that we're not doing it, so if we could
Actually-
just say no longer applicable.
Actually,
Yeah.
that's not true. The update is on page 22 of the 2022
Before we get
plan.
to that, question on page 79, under, on the very top of the page, stop sign improvements 2018. And I see you went to a great length describing installing a new stop sign at Harmony and Third. That's great. I think the city needs to consider improved signage at Harmony and Fifth. We live at the corner of Harmony and Fourth, and I cannot tell you how many vehicles ignore the sign saying that that's one way from Fifth on, and just come roaring down Harmony in the opposite direction. So I think, that's something that needs to be considered, putting more prominent signs so they know that one little narrow section between Sixth and Fifth is two-way, the rest of it is one-way.
It actually was noted as a problem that needed to be worked on somewhere in this, just for, information.
Anything else? From chapter 7?
I'm sorry, I'm talking with them.
Oh, okay.
Next.
Chapter 11. Housing. Again, this is a lot of demographic information that's gonna need to be updated.
I had a comment on page 112, median house values. One of the reasons that, the city area called Historic Newcastle was, invented and approved was that the house values in the historic area of Newcastle are substantially different from the rest of the city. The reason that this is important is because we get appraisals on houses down here and they can go terribly wrong. Some of you may have had that experience, and we did, of being appraised for a lot less than they're worth because of this kind of demographic information. So I would suggest that we have a section for the now acknowledged historic Newcastle versus rest of Newcastle because of the problems for people trying to get mortgages and things like that.
That sounds like
I
something for the.
personally
year.
Go ahead. Okay, well, we can do that for the 10-year.
I'm only, everything I say is 10-year.
Okay,
Everything I say is 10-year.
okay. I hear what you're saying, and I mean, we had that issue as well. But then I think that's also setting up us versus them, and the city of Newcastle is much larger than just the 6 square block historic area, so I don't think that's really appropriate. This is a median that's taking into consideration everything and averaging out. Obviously, the homes might be more, and that'll be, you know, appraised accordingly. But to actually specify and put in a section delineating historic district from the rest of Newcastle, again, that's effectively redlining, it's effectively putting us against them. I disagree that completely.
Well, I'm not sure it would impact appraisals anyway.
No, I don't think it will be.
Because an appraiser isn't gonna look at the comp plan to get an idea of what properties.
You're gonna look at our surrounding properties that compare.
What else from chapter 11? I think.
Also, one other thing, I found this chapter very helpful for me as a fairly new resident since 2019. I mean, I've heard the name Shawtown and Washington Park, and so I've heard those names, but now I actually know where they are. You know, Van Dyke, I know Buttonwood, Boothurst, I know if you see it, Route 9, and you know, of course, I knew Dominicville, but this helped me immensely, just kind of getting a grasp on the various neighborhoods that make up Newcastle.
I think the goals and strategies are something we're gonna have to spend some time talking about. When we're ready to do the 10-year plan, because, again, they're talking about things like increasing affordable housing opportunities, which is a way larger issue than anything we can really deal with. And then chapter 14 is implementation of everything that's in the comp plan. I'm gonna suggest we table that one unless somebody has something they really want to delve into, because I think that really needs to be gone through a little more closely, and it's already 8:30.
I agree.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, I believe that those are just reiterations.
Oh, well, what's at the end of each of those chapters?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's just a
Just
chapter.
summarizing it
Everything in
to a certain
one
extent.
in place, and that's what we use in our annual report.
Exactly.
So we still have a number of chapters to get through. Do we want to do chapters in February? Are we thinking we're gonna be, and actually, let me redo this. I'm kind of thinking the land use is something maybe we ought to be talking about before we talk about the Airbnb discussion, because I think they go hand in hand. What's other people's thoughts?
That's fine.
That's fine.
Yeah, I
That
do
would
not
be the
agree.
only chapter I would review at the next meeting though.
At the
Right.
next meeting, we need to do the Airbnb.
Yeah, but I think the land
Well,
use
we
is
already are
gonna
doing that.
dictate some of
In
that.
addition,
Yeah,
Some of the
okay.
discussion and things we,
Yep, so we'll just do land use and then we'll have that Airbnb discussion next. Okay.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Just to frame the land use chapter before, as various members are reading it. I've talked about this before, so what you're gonna find in the land use chapter is that the plan took the existing zoning categories and the existing zoning map that was in place at the time of this plan, which is essentially the zoning map that we have today. And and took various zoning categories and lumped them into general land use categories.
Okay.
Where it took the city's various zoning districts. They took various zoning districts that currently exist on your zoning map and in your zoning ordinance today. And it lumped them into general categories. So the R1 zone and the R2 zone and the R3 zone became the residential future land use district.
Okay.
And the same for commercial and the same for industrial and office. So what you're gonna find is that there's not a different vision for future land use in this comprehensive plan than currently exists in zoning today.
Okay.
Because the plan felt that, you know, the existing zoning is a good future land use plan. So when you're reading this, just, it may seem a little odd, but I wanted to
Okay.
say that before people read it in detail.
Okay. Okay. So that brings us to public comments. So if you have a public comment to make, Bree, will you keep track of time? You have 3 minutes. Before we start the timer, please sign in and then state your name and address. Anybody want to make a comment?
I'm Carol Bukolich. I live at 33 The Strand. And myself and 3 of my colleagues are here representing over 70 historic residential Newcastle homeowners. We are here to make 2 requests of you. First of all, our first request is that we ask that you recommend to Congress or to the council that only tourist homes are only permitted in the historic commercial district, not in the historic residential district. Now, that's not an original request just made by us. If you look at the Newcastle County's new regulations, their new codes, they clearly say that in residential areas, there can be no short-term rentals. Now, I know that council in Newcastle City does not have to adhere to anything that Newcastle County says, because Newcastle County only impacts unconsolidated areas of the county. But those consolidated areas are huge. So Hocassin, Claymont, Greenville, Arden are all unconsolidated areas within Newcastle County. In each of those cities, there can be no short-term rentals in residential areas. So we ask that our council take that very brave step, much like the county council has done, and make the ruling that tourist homes can only be permitted in the historic commercial district. Our second request is around the traditional bed and breakfast kind of model. The model where there is a person from the community, the homeowner, in the home when the paying guest is in the home. Those are already operating in the city. Many of them are not licensed. And in most instances, well, actually, there are no specific codes currently in the Newcastle City codes that say anything about bed and breakfast. So we're not talking about Airbnbs. We're talking about tourist homes, which are now often called whole home short-term rentals because the term tourist home has become confusing. And we're talking about traditional B and Bs. We support B and Bs being in the historic residential district and in the historic commercial district. So we ask that as you begin thinking about the kinds of things that you are going to propose as regulations, that you consider our requests for 2 different kinds of placements for B&Bs and for tourist homes. And now I'm going to turn to my colleague Ron, who's going to give you a little bit of background on why we think this is important. You would like me to put my name on
Yes,
here.
please.
I will do that as Ron is coming out.
Thank you.
My name's Ron Stack, and I'm a resident of, my husband and I live at 104 East Third Street. Got a little frog in my throat, so you have to bear with me. I'm gonna try to answer a couple of questions, really relevant to why are homeowners against permitting whole short-term rentals in the historic residence district? And please pay attention to that wording because it's very specific for that reason, as Carol pointed out. So some of the select research-based findings are that short-term rentals reveal a wealth of problems that cities have aimed to address through their new strict regulations of short-term rentals. Of special concern to the historic residence district homeowners are a loss of community feel, a loss of affordable housing, and the impact of tourist homes on property values. These are all 3 pretty major points. First, I'm going to talk about a couple of those. Loss of community feel. An ever-rotating group of people coming into neighborhoods changes the character of the neighborhood. Rather than connecting with others, the residents there no longer have strong community feelings. They don't feel tied to each other. They become disengaged from helping others. They close their doors. They're concerned about their personal safety. This is based on research, by the way. This isn't just opinion. Neighborhood and community pride, as a result, dissipate. Secondly, on the loss of affordable rental housing. Short-term rentals can be lucrative. That's why people do them. In Charleston, South Carolina, for example, Christopher King, a Charleston consultant on historic properties, noted that prior to Charleston's implementation of new strict short-term rental regulations, the city lost 15% of its long-term rentals to short-term rentals. In addition, the remaining long-term rent prices increased. Fewer long-term rentals and rising long-term rental rates push families out of the city. So the punchline really is these problems lead to a significant problem for almost anybody, and that's the decline in property values. Thank you.
Thank you.
Adrian is doing this.
That's my coffee. Adrian Alganaris, I live at 106 East 3rd Street, Newcastle, been here since 2015. So I'm here to talk about the actual definition of these short-term rentals. As Max mentioned earlier, the city's current definition was developed in 1968. I can't believe that guy wasn't even born by 1968, but that's neither here nor there. It defines tourist homes as a dwelling in which overnight accommodations in no more than 5 guest rooms are provided or offered for transient guests for compensation. Today, there's a new language. It's short-term rental, which is what we're here to discuss. But there are 2 kinds. There's whole home and bed and breakfast. And by the way, this whole idea of Airbnb, that's a little confusing because that's like calling a copy of a piece of paper a Xerox. Airbnb is a hosting platform. It's not necessarily a type of rental. You go to Airbnb, you can get an apartment, you can get a whole house, you probably even get a room and a bed and breakfast. But that's not really the point. Really need to, I think that the commission needs to be more specific about the language and remove any ambiguity about what a short-term rental is and what you're going to hopefully have some regulation over. A bed and breakfast is the conditional use of a property whereby the homeowner or of the property who resides in the property uses one or more bedrooms for the purpose of providing sleeping accommodations to paying guests and provides breakfast for these paying guests. What was his name? Richard Rennie, in The Day the Earth Stood Still, when he was looking for a place to stay, and he finds this house that Patricia Neal is renting rooms out of. That to me is a B&B, not an Airbnb, but a proper B&B. If we have those in these towns, as you say, it's not a big deal. You're trying to make a couple of extra shekels. A tourist home, now that's a whole home, is the conditional use of property whereby the owner of the property uses the house for the purpose of providing sleeping accommodations for paying guests. The property is fully functioning, provides it's a fully functioning private accommodation, which includes cooking, living, sanitary, and sleeping facilities. Okay, that's basically you're going to rent the house out. And that's what I think we're here to try to regulate. The idea of renting out private homes in the historic district of the town. It's not Airbnb, it's not booking.com. Those are just platforms. You got no argument with them.
Your time's up.
Okay, well, that's it.
Thank you.
Clear up the language on it. That's all.
Student financing. If you guys can please take your seat, the room's really small. I just want to make sure everyone can move around. Hi, I'm Lori Williams and I live on 30 The Strand. We are asking the planning commission to regulate the short-term rentals, B&B and tourist homes. We are specifically asking or suggesting that you consider these 7 regulations. The first one being that the home being rented must be the primary residence of the owner. The second one is that the homeowner must be present in the home overnight when there are guests. Third one is limits on the total number of days per year that rooms can be rented. What I just said. Number 4, limits on the number of guests, like for example, 1 bedroom would equate to 2 guests. Number 5, limit on the number of consecutive days a guest may stay. 6, homeowners responsible for ensuring that guests adhere to the city regulations. And 7, that there's mandatory safety requirements must be met before licenses or permits are issued. And with these regulations, we completely support tourist homes in the commercial district. Some additional regulations to be considered when you're thinking about tourist homes is the number of off-street parking, which I think has already been addressed. Homeowner property manager must be available 24/7 so that they can resolve issues quickly. The property owner and the manager must be a resident of the city to operate a tourist home and limit the number of tourist homes that a property manager can manage. Some of the conversations that I've heard around the town is that our town's just small, we don't generate that much interest. Maybe that is true. And possibly right now it's true. We don't know if it's going to remain the same. What I'm wondering is the conversation that we've been having, do we ask, is this at the betterment of the city? What does it affect? How does it affect our residents? And not just our residents, but our commercial offices and companies that are within our district. We can't get lost on the fact that what is happening is certainly from your personal financial gain for people who are opening these residents and making money off of them, not opposed to making money off of them, but never at the expense of the betterment of our city or the risk of our residents. And that's what I ask you to consider.
Thank you.
the city's last comprehensive plan in 2020,
Your name and address.
I'm sorry, John Reeves, 15 East Second Street. The city's last comprehensive plan in 2020 included a community survey with a critical question. Would you like to see more, less, or about the same amount of the following land uses? Choices include recreation, community centers, and healthcare. But only 3 uses were scored more by a majority of respondents. Stores and restaurants, both about 70%, and arts and entertainment, about 60%. So these are critical desires for the community for land use, execution. So logically, encouraging these 3 categories of land use should be a high priority of a planning agenda, particularly as we recover from the pandemic shutdown. Luckily, creative entrepreneurs are stepping up and investing in more than a dozen new retail enterprises, events, and venues in just a few years. And despite a lot of people saying, oh, they're just here to make a buck, nobody comes to Newcastle to make a buck. They come here because they love Newcastle and they want to contribute to the community. But their success is not inevitable. Although the residents of our historic district want more stores, restaurants, and entertainment, we're a small customer base. It takes out-of-town visitors to sustain these efforts. Our wonderful array of historic sites and museums also benefit from more visitors, and they are hurting in many cases. So encouraging more visitors should also be a planning priority. One type of visitor is particularly strategic, we think. Overnight visitors are more likely to do multiple things in town: to shop, to eat, to walk in the park, to visit museums, to tour historic houses, to leave with memories of Newcastle that encourage them to return. Overnight accommodations mean that residents can ask friends and family to stay, and local gatherings have some place to host their participants. At the same time, our new governor is ramping up investments in more walkable, bikeable, visitor-friendly infrastructure. So there's more opportunities to connect to other communities through an overnight accommodation strategy. If we think of guest rooms, however defined, as a critical infrastructure for the visitor-driven amenities of historic Newcastle, we may want to research an important question. Do we have enough? How many rooms do we currently have? And should we be encouraging more rooms in order to meet our priorities? What's the optimum number? And how do we get there? Rather than focusing only on the hypothetical negative impacts of guest accommodations, particularly based on large urban areas that are nowhere like our town, should we be identifying ways to collaborate with entrepreneurs and improve synergies with other business organizations and historical organizations in town? Because the community is not just streets and sewers and historic buildings. It's the services and amenities that make it vibrant and livable. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bill Gross, 1301 13th Street. First, I'd like to thank this commission because you actually take the residents' needs, wants, and opinions to heart, as evident in the 1-year moratorium that you guys rightly passed, and our 3 councilmen, Zelt, Souter, and Day, turned down. Whatever your decision is,
Stick to this, 'cause we don't much.
I'm going back,
Okay,
deduct the 2 seconds.
keep going.
No matter what you choose to do, I feel that a few things should go into the enacting of whatever it is. One, they should be owner occupied, where it's not managed by a broker that covers 3 or 4 houses. No one's allowed to rent the house or stay at the house without the owner there. Number 2, anything that is passed by this commission or the city council should be retroactively put so that it's a universal plan to cover every single inn, whatever you would call bed and breakfast, so that there's no question as to what is supposed to happen, not what the owner wants to happen. There's a huge difference. And I guess lastly, don't let the city gaslight you into the number of houses, cars, and people that potentially can move into this city once these projects that have already been authorized. We're looking at more like 2,000 people and 3,000 to 4,000 cars. Also, I feel that no campers, no motorhomes, no commercial vehicles should be allowed at any house that is in the residential area. And that's got to be mandated by the owner, no exceptions, and only one vehicle per house per guest. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, thank you for your comments. Everybody will take those into consideration when we meet. Oh, I have one more, sorry. This was sent to us today from David Brundage. He said Newcastle's regulation allowing tourist homes in the historic residential district, not the commercial district, is in immediate need of updating and defining. The current wording allows unlimited and unrestricted use of residential dwellings to be repurposed as rental units for short or long-term use by transient people of unknown backgrounds or intentions. This is completely unacceptable to most of the owner residents in Newcastle residential district. Regulations defining a bed and breakfast should require the owner to also live in the same dwelling to be host and ambassador for the city. To be otherwise, it's to make it a hotel rental. I'm sorry, I have to. I urge the planning commission to immediately study the situation and that they take under serious consideration the comparison to other cities with designated historic districts that already regulate short-term rentals. Information on this has been provided by the commission, to the commission by local residents here in Newcastle. Since these uses have already been studied and regulated elsewhere, there is no reason to be slow in coming up with acceptable rules for our own historic residential district. I particularly recommend the data report submitted by Cynthia Batty. Thank you. That was the only other one we got. And no one else has any other comments, correct? All right, the public comments are closed. Cynthia did. It's 10 and 9, Cynthia. Can you do a hack report in 3 minutes?
No, I'm not prepared to do that now. There's nothing significant to report other than what I mentioned to you that I think we need to focus on getting our documents.
Okay.
In order.
Margot, can you forward that feedback to me when you get a chance? Oh, the email from the Brundage?
Yeah, I can. Thank you.
If anyone would like the report that I prepared, you can send me an email or a text and I'd be happy to share it.
Is there any other, Antonina, or Chris, do you have anything else to add at this point?
Do not, Madam Chair.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Kristen, I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much for all your hard work. I just-